Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today I'm doing the memory book tag. This tag was created by Katie over at A Sea of Tomes, and I'll link her channel below. I was tagged by Cara from Wild Book Garden, so thank you very much for tagging me. Cara tagged me in this like months ago, and I am just now getting around to doing it, so sorry that I am the worst at doing tags in a timely manner after having been tagged, but we're doing it now. So this tag is all about different kinds of memories and books that we associate with those memories. So there are 10 questions and let's get started. Question 1 is early years. What is the first book that you can remember reading on your own? And for this, I'm assuming that they mean like a full like chapter book, because I do still have the first picture book I remember reading on my own. So I'm gonna do both. The first picture book I remember reading on my own is Home for a Bunny by Margaret Wise Brown and illustrated by Garth Williams. And this was a favorite picture book of mine when I was very little, and it is adorable, and it is about a bunny who is looking for a home. And like, look how cute that is. So that's the first picture book I remember reading on my own. The first full like book that I really remember reading on my own, that was like a chapter book and everything, was The Protector of the Small First Test by Tamara Pierce. So First Test is the first book in her Protector of the Small quartet, and this one takes place in the world of Tortal, which is the magical world that a lot of Tamara Pierce's books take place in. It's following Kel, who is a girl training to become a knight, and she's the first girl who is being admitted to like the training school where they train knights, and so sort of all of the trials that she goes through, being the first and only girl who is currently training to be a knight. And yeah, this is not my favorite of Tamara Pierce's series, but this is the one that got me into reading, and this is the first book that I really like remember sitting down and like reading the whole thing. Question 2 is school, a book that you had to read for school and you have strong memories about. Now for me, I had a lot of control over what books I was reading for school because I was actually homeschooled. I was homeschooled my entire life until I went to undergrad, until I went to college. So all up until then. So I had a lot of control over what books I was reading, and one of the books that I read that I have very strong memories about is The Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer. So I was really into Greek mythology and Roman mythology and all of that when I was younger, and so a lot of our classes kind of revolved around that because it was something that I was really passionate about. When I was, I guess, in high school, I have a really hard time knowing what year things happened since I was homeschooled and I didn't have like actual grades. But I think when I was like early high school maybe, we read this. My brother was also homeschooled for a little while, and so my mom and my brother and I all read this together. And with this one in particular, we actually like literally read it together. We would all get together in the living room and my mom would read it out loud to us so that we could discuss the book as things were happening, and so that we would all like be at the same place in the book so that we could have our discussions. And I just have very clear memories of like sitting on the couch, my dog would be on the couch with me, and just like listening to my mom read, and she would do all these different voices for the different characters and like pausing at different places to have discussions about the books. And also one of my like clearest memories about it is that we would laugh over some of the like epithets that they had for some of the gods and some of the like reoccurring themes and things, especially they would always describe like the rosy-fingered dawn, and that phrase came up so often that we would always laugh at that. And just for some reason the repetitiveness of it we found hilarious, but it was so fun to get to read this like with my mom and my brother and discuss it and just like laugh about it. And I just think that was such a great way to do it, because big epics like this can sometimes be tedious to read, and it just made it so much fun. Question 3 is a book that you remember reading with your parents. So clearly I read The Iliad and the Odyssey with my mom, as well as many other books. She read out loud to us a lot when I was younger. A book that I read with my dad was, he always really loved the Tintin comics. I don't know if other people like read them that much, but my dad would read the Tintin comics to my brother and I at night sometimes before we went to bed. But it was always really funny because he would start to fall asleep while he was reading it, but he would keep talking, and so he would just start like babbling things that were not happening in the comics. And my brother and I were very young, and so we would be looking at it being like, I can't really read, but I'm pretty sure that's not what's happening in this comic. But it was always very funny to kind of see what he would say as he was falling asleep reading to us. But I have another answer for this also, because I have a lot of answers for this question, a lot of memories, and there are apparently a lot of books that I read with my family and my parents. But on Friday nights, my mom would have us all like read a book together. And so sometimes we would do what my mom called Torah talk, because my family is Jewish, and so Friday night is Shabbat, and we would have our Shabbat dinner, and then afterwards we would read a book together. And so sometimes it would be the Torah portion for that week, and then we would discuss the Torah portion. Sometimes it would be something else. So sometimes it would be books that were kind of about like values, or books that were about philosophy. There was one book that I really remember reading that was called, I think it was called like, Do You Really Think What You Think You Think? And there was another one that was called like The Pig That Wants to Be Eaten, or something like that. There were these books that would kind of have these hypothetical situations or scenarios that, you know, there were like no right or wrong answers. You kind of had to just figure out your own like ethics or morality or your own philosophy based on how you answer those. Kind of like that, there's that question of like the train going down the tracks, and it's like you can switch it, but like if it goes down one track it'll kill one person, if it goes down another track it'll kill 3 people, and like that kind of thing. And so we would read books like those and kind of discuss what would we do in that hypothetical situation, and we would just like discuss the scenario as a family and discuss those books. So yeah, so those are other books that I have really clear memories of discussing with my parents, but also like my 3 older siblings, we would all discuss it together. Question 4 is Midnight, a book that you remember staying up late to read. And again, I have 2 answers for this. So the first one I have is Squire from The Protector of the Small Quartet by Tamara Pierce. So this is the 3rd book in the Protector of the Small series, and I just have a very clear memory of being awake very late at night. Everybody else was asleep, and something happened in this book that I was just like freaking out about, and like, oh my god, I can't handle this. And also, so at that time my dog used to sleep in my bed with me, so I couldn't, like, everyone else in my house was asleep, I couldn't wake up everybody else, but I was like freaking out over something that happened in this. So I remember like waking up my dog and just being like, you have to wake up, I have to tell somebody, and like telling my dog about this, and like probably scared him. So I remember being awake very, very late reading this and waking up my poor dog to try and explain to him what was happening in this book. The other book that I wanted to mention is, of course, The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. So this whole series really would be an answer for this, because each of these books, a friend of mine recommended this series to me, and I got the first book. I read it all in one sitting. I started like in one evening and I read through to like 7 a.m. the next morning. Immediately the next day I had to go out and get the next book, so that the next night I read the next book all in one night. I did that with every single book in this series. I would just stay up the whole night reading them. They were just like, I was so obsessed with these. Question 5 is Holiday, a bookish memory from the holidays. And for this, I have our book night for Hanukkah. So Hanukkah is 8 nights, so that's a lot of nights to be celebrating. So a lot of times my family does themes for each night, and one of the themes that we have is book night. So on book night, what we would do is our parents would give us Barnes & Noble gift cards, and then we would all go to Barnes & Noble together. We would get like hot chocolate chocolates and things at the little cafe, and then everybody would kind of like break off to mosey around the bookstore to pick out books to get with our gift cards, and then afterwards we would all reconvene to kind of compare what we had gotten. There was one year especially that I remember very clearly, because there was one year that I bought an entire series all at once that I knew nothing about, and I was like, I hope that I like these, which was the Rune Lord series by David Farland. This is the second book, because I don't know where I put the first book, but this series, I bought all 6 books, I think it was 6 books, all at once. At one of our Hanukkah book nights, and I ended up really liking the series, so that worked out well, but it was a leap of faith. Question 6 is Passion, a book that helped shape you. And for this, I decided to go with Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. This is just like a very important book in my reading life. I read this when I was probably around 13 or 14, and this is one that really like changed the way that I thought about the world, and I feel like it's hard to explain like what is it exactly that changed, but this was one of the first books that I ever read that I had like a mind blown kind of experience. The concept of censorship had never occurred to my little like 13-year-old brain, and reading this book just like blew my mind. So after reading this, I got really obsessed with the idea of censorship and book burning and things like that, and I started doing so much research about censorship and different like periods of history that there were censorship, and that led me into researching like McCarthyism, and I read a lot of other books that are like dystopian, like classic dystopian books. And in all of my classes that I took, if there was an option, if there was like any wiggle room about what a project could be about, I would make it about like censorship or book burning or something to do with this, because I became very obsessed with this for a good chunk of years. But also, this is what got me into dystopian fiction as a genre. Question 7 is travel, so a book that you remember reading on vacation or while you were traveling that brings fond memories. And I actually don't have a lot of books for this because I don't tend to read a lot while I am... Oh! No, I just thought of another one. Okay, we're gonna do this too. Okay, so I have 2 books for this now. Both of these are more recent because I don't usually tend to read a lot while I am traveling or on vacation, because I'm usually like busy doing other things. But more recently I have been reading more while I'm like traveling. Anyways, so the first book that I have is Every Heart a Doorway by Sean McGuire. This book I read when I was going to a conference. There was a mindfulness conference that I went to with my mom, because she is trained as a mindfulness teacher also, so if there are conferences that we're interested in, we like go together. But so we went to a mindfulness conference together. I brought this book with me, and it was really fun. It was fun to go to a conference with my mom. It was a really good conference. Everybody there's like so nice because it's all people who like are there to talk about meditation and mindfulness. And I remember there was a part of the conference where I got very tired because I'm very introverted and there was just like a lot of stuff happening. So I like found a comfy place to sit. And during one of the workshops that I didn't want to go to, I just sat in the corner and read this book. The other book that I have here is The Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. So this is actually from another conference that I went to. So there was a work conference that I went to a couple of years ago in Florida. And on the plane and when I had time, I read Royal Assassin. This is my favorite book of the Farseer trilogy. I really liked this one. I didn't love the entire trilogy, but this one I thought was really, really good. And I have a very clear memory and clear feeling of reading this book. And that trip. And I think that trip is more like clear in my mind because it's so strongly associated with this book. Question 8 is Hideaway, one of your favorite places to read and why it is your favorite. So, I mean, there are some obvious answer is like I mostly read in my bed and it's very comfortable and I love my bed and I love reading there. But one place that I really love reading that I don't get to read very often, but is maybe more unusual, is on airplanes. So I really like being on airplanes. I hate airports. Like, airports stress me out so much. But once I'm on the plane, I actually really enjoy airplanes. There's something very like cozy about them for some reason. I think because it's like a small space and there's like a lot of white noise, and I just like it a lot. So I find it very easy to focus on airplanes. So whenever I take a plane trip, I usually will do two things on the plane. I will meditate for a while and then I will read. And yeah, I like reading on planes. Question 9 is life change. So a book that helped you through a life change. And I actually don't really have an answer for this. There isn't really a book that I can specifically think of that I feel like helped me through a life change. So I don't have an answer for this. And question 10 is stone. So name 3 books or series that imprinted on your soul and impacted you in many ways. So first up, I have Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. I already talked about this one and how this impacted me. The second book that I have is The Forest Wife by Teresa Tomlinson. This is one that I read when I was very young, and this definitely impacted my life. Like, at the time, I loved the idea of the forest wife. Most of the games that I played when I was little were based on this, on the forest wife, and being living in the forest and being a healer and all of that. So it definitely impacted that, but it has also still impacted the things that I love now as an adult, that I still love. Like the forest, I still love books about healers. I still like some of my favorite books have similar themes to this book. And so I think this has really impacted my reading taste and a lot of what I consider like my vibe, my aesthetic, my like, you know, like what are the things that I'm like, this is my thing. A lot of it comes from this. And the third one that I have is the Great Tree of Avalon trilogy by T.A. Barron. I think I have a review video for this series. If I do, I'll link it below. This is a series that I loved when I was younger and is very nostalgic for me. At this point, do I think it's like the best written book ever or series ever? Not necessarily, but it was very important to me when I was younger. This also has a lot of like tree nature vibes to it, but this was one of the first like books or series that I read that had like a message or a theme that I really understood and really resonated with me. It had a lot to say about taking care of like the earth and the environment, but also like kindness to other people and creatures, respecting other people. There's a quote from this that was my favorite quote for a long time, and like, I don't know, maybe still is. I don't know if I have a favorite quote now, but there's a quote from this that says, "Beware all ye mortals, this warning to heed, when faith turns to arrogance or joy turns to greed, belief becomes shackles, not wings of the freed, then hard be thy heart, corrupt be thy creed." And that was something that I thought was like so amazing. It was one of the first books that I remember like really understanding the themes and values that it was trying to portray, and that I loved it for that. And now when I read books, I love books that have like really clear themes, or books that look at, you know, morality, or how different kinds of humanity uses different kinds of power, or the way that they treat other types of beings. I'm having a hard time like explaining exactly what it is, but this was the first book that I experienced something like that, and I really loved it, and I still love that kind of thing. So that is all for the memory book tag. I don't have anyone off the top of my head that I'm going to tag, but if I do tag anyone, I will list them in the description below. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye.